Hey guys, it's Jeff with Half-Assed Gaming. Coming at you with a video today I was asked to do regarding UV mapping, as well as dealing with some materials. I know materials are kind of a difficult thing sometimes, and the best part about Blender and Blender tools is that a lot of times you can manage those things pretty straightforward and easily using the tools that exist already in the software. So I'm going to show you a couple of those things right now. This is a storage tank. I was going to use it for some trailer, but it's kind of a little shoddy, so not really of use, but I can definitely show you how to kind of map things and that sort of stuff. Pretty straightforward. I have all my text on and my pointer so you can see where I'm going and what I'm clicking on. Hopefully this can help you with what you're trying to get done. So first of all, let's go over one thing I really want to emphasize, especially when you're using Blender tools. You definitely want to take care to check out this project base path here, and not just the path, but all of these actions here. Some of them don't really matter necessarily to you, but for instance, the matte substance, that gives you the latest materials. If they change materials in if SCS upgrades materials, changes materials, does anything like that, that's all going to be in the database of the base files. So if you're unsure of how to get base files, you want to go into your game directory, pull the base, and extract it using the SCS extraction tool. Then you'll be able to find all these base files, as you can see right here. I have it listed as base. I'm only on 137 still because 138 is still in beta, so I haven't upgraded that part. The other thing is the shader presets. So the presets for all of your materials and stuff that you're going to use, they have a preset set up, and those are part of the Blender tools text files. So you just go into your scripts area wherever you have Blender installed, go to the add-ons, go to the SCS tools, and then you'll find the shader presets.txt, and you want to input that here. That means anytime you pick a material, the shader will be automatically filled in with what SCS recommends, and from there you can go ahead and start adjusting things from there. It makes it a little bit easier for that. So let's address some of the UV mapping things real quick. I know that I've talked to a couple of my team members about mapping things and how it's kind of convoluted and sometimes a lot more difficult than maybe it should be. So hopefully I can cast a little light on that and how to make things a little bit more easy for you. First of all, I'm going to tell you right now, separate anything that you want mapped separately, if you want to say that. It makes it so much easier in the end to, especially if you're putting together something that's one file, like one total material. Like this whole tank would probably be one whole material, but you'd separate it out into different parts with different colorizations on parts and so on and so forth. And you can do that many different ways. But UV mapping is very important because it allows you to go ahead and put parts of this whole item onto different parts over here. So you say you up in this top left quadrant you had like blue, and you wanted this tube up here to be blue. Well, you could separate that out in a UV layer so that that part was up here, but all the other parts are gray, and maybe your gray area is down here, so those would be put over here. That's how people map things in this game, and they end up being just one texture file because they have all the colors or textures that they want to use all contained in this one space. And that makes for obviously smaller file sizes and all kinds of other items as well. But all in all, it makes everything quick and easy to look at and to change colors and for you and also the end user if they wanted to change colors. So we're going to look at the top of this tank over here. And this is where using the keyboard comes in handy, right? So I want to press 7. 7's going to give me a top-down view of this, particular cover on top of this tank. So if I press 7, it's going to give me an isometric view, which means there's no, I forget what the function is called, but there's no horizon, so it doesn't, wow, it's very terrible that I can't think of this, because I took CAD drawing, and this is what you didn't want to happen. But anyway, I digress. So if I just leave it in normal mode like this, there's some change to the top of it because it's not isometric viewing. And that is what you want when you're UV mapping, because otherwise things can become curved that shouldn't be, and things like that. So if I just go ahead and also let's go over here and I'll show you this. If you go to the object data, you'll notice that there's no UV map. And that's why there's nothing showing up over here, because there's no UV map. So if I go ahead and just smart project, just with the default values, it's going to give me this. Now, why is there two different covers, it looks like? Well, because one of them is the underside of this top. So this has a thickness. So there's a thickness there. This is the edge, all of these things here. These are the edges of it. This is the handle here. And some various other parts, like this is the top of the handle, and then like the little pieces over here that connect to the actual top. So how can we go ahead and get those all separated into something that looks a little bit more cohesive? What I do is if I'm just applying a specific color to one thing, and I just want to do it like top down, and everything is going to be exactly the same, I project from view. So this is going to give me an exact circle like this is mapped onto, because this is all just red, say. And then our red quadrant is up here. Now this whole cap is going to just be red. Now if you want to go into more depth, see this is there's a lot of texture, smoothing over here. So that's what all these extra vertices are. So if I wanted to separate this handle, maybe do something like that. See, they're all connected. Everything is connected in here. So it may be a little difficult to do this unless you do something like this. And you got to turn on X-ray. Whoops. X-ray. Okay. And then C. See, it's actually connected to the top, so that's going to make it much harder to do. Because once I select all, it's going to do the top again. You can separate this. It just takes a little bit longer because you're pulling. Realistically, what you need to do is do it in a face value instead of a vertice value. So you would do, you would do this, and that. here. Now this was not like modeled, I would say, the greatest, because it's you can see that there are a lot of inconsistencies about the corners and things, but this is just what I'm working with today, so do this and that and this. And you can also do like this, so you can really zoom in. It looks like we missed a spot over here. Alright, so we got one side of the handle. And also sometimes it's easier to do it from the underside like this, so you can see what you're actually selecting and not just hoping that you're not getting hold of parts of the actual top, which is what I do. So that looks pretty good, I think. Let's zoom out here and have a look. Oh, we missed a little bit there. Oops. And you don't have to use the circle mode, you can use square mode. I just find circle mode a little bit easier to kind of negotiate. And I might want to get rid of that. Okay, so it looks like we've got this all separated. I think we've got everything we need. So you press P, and you'll see the separate function. So this is by material, by loose parts, by selection. In this case, we're picking selection because just the handle is what we want, and that's the thing that we've actually selected in the window. So P, oops. So now, I turn off X-ray and I select this. Now we just have the handle. So a lot of times, oh, we actually brought some of the other part. Let's see. So I can press P again. And then press this. Press J. And we can go back over here. Okay. So now I don't have any of the cover. Let's look around again. Nope. Okay. So, realistically, there'd be a few less pieces. But I will show you this anyway. So, there's a lot of ways to UV map. one like I showed you, where you just select the top and you put the cover over on the top left side because it's going to be red, etc., etc. If you want to map this out like a truck, there's a painstaking way to do it, a somewhat easy way to do it. I mean, there's about a billion different ways to do it. When you're doing something as complicated as a truck, though, there's a lot of extra parts and pieces you're going to have to incorporate into the UV layer over here later. And if you don't take care to kind of separate this in a quick and reasonable fashion, it's going to be really, really hard to kind of look at later and try to figure out what exactly is going on here. So let's say I select this edge here, and now I'm going to go to edge. Where is it? Mark seam. So now if I mark this seam like this, oops, if I go like that and I mark that seam, and then I go up here, and here is where it starts getting, let's do control. So if I want to mark that seam, I don't know why it sent me to the underside of that. That was interesting. And then this right here, and then mark. And then mark this seam. So as long as I've done that correctly and all of that intersects, when I press this unwrap function, you'll see this right here. This right here is that edge. So whatever you select comes out in its correct form. So if you unwrap or you mark seams all along this thing, it's going to come out exactly correctly measured for the entire item, if that makes sense. So this right here will be exactly the same length as it is compared to this part over here, which is very important when you're doing a truck, because you don't want the gas tanks to be massive on the UV layer compared to the rest of the truck, because then it's hard to draw lines across them and change then you have to change the thickness of the line to make it match, and that becomes more difficult. So when you can mark seams like this and then you unwrap this thing using the unwrap command, if you're doing this all manually, believe you me, it is painstaking. Everything inside the mark will not be changed. So it will unwrap this piece exactly. And then if I did this piece down here and unwrapped that, it would look exactly like this. And then so on and so on and so on all around the entire part. So you can manually mark seams like that all day long in order to create a UV map that then you can, purposefully go ahead and colorize, or however you want to do that. Or if you're, like say this was a fender or whatever, you wanted to be able to make a stripe down here and then a stripe down here, and you wanted them to be the same size without having to adjust in your paint program, then this is the way to do it. You want to mark those seams, make sure that they're all, that way you can make sure that they're all the same size. If I remove this mark right here, and I remove this mark, and then I select this, and that, and mark those, and then mark this seam, and then come over here, and let's turn this off so I'm not seeing through. So I mark this one, and that one, and that one, and I mark those. So now I have one continuous edge right here. Now if I go ahead and unwrap that, now you see that piece is all exactly correct on the side, but everything else is bunched into a big pile over there because it doesn't know what you want it to do. You've only marked one side and nothing else is marked, so it just piles it into the corner. But anytime you ever unwrap this after you've marked seams, it's going to be the correct sizing in comparison to everything else. And that way you can, now I can take this and come over here and select it. Oh, it's just picking up everything. All right, well, that's silly. Anyway, if they were better separated, we'll say, you could come over here and just, rotate this around like this because I want it to face this way or whatever it is. And then move it over there and so on and so on. So you could do that with every single part and map out exactly where you want everything. So that's the marking the seams part. But realistically, for all intents and purposes, unless you're doing a paint value, you just want to go ahead and, oh, see, those are all attached too. Oh my goodness. Okay. So they really made these connect together. Not really quite what I was looking for here, but that's okay. So let's change this back to this. Okay, escape, we got all that. So I can press P again, separate it. Interesting. So let's P. Unhide. And that looks terrible. Anyway. So this one's a little nozzle here. It's actually double thick. So that's going to be a little bit more difficult to separate, but now you have it separated, so you can go ahead and we'll say smart project because it's going to be an odd tube. So this is going to separate it to the best of its ability in this case. But if you really wanted to, if you wanted to do sides, you could split it down the middle. So you could do something like that. And then turn it to the side and project from view. And then hide that. And then turn it around and select it and project from view. And then rotate that, I'll say, and grab it and put it there. So then we'll unhide. So that's both sides of it. And it's going to look funny if you get to the edge because it's going to be stretched. And the only way to not have it stretched like that is to do a lot more sections, or mark a seam down the center, etc. Which is hard to do on circular items, but either way, these are the ways that I have kind of learned to do some tricks and get things done somewhat simpler, I would say. So like this, selected all that. And so if I take this and I unproject, if I smart UV unwrap for that, now it's going to do that. Now this piece particularly is done actually pretty well because it's all separated out quite nicely, actually. It's not quite to scale because you can see this is the bottom right here. I'm gonna guess that this is the bottom down here, or some facet. Maybe it's this part and this part, or maybe it's the part that goes around the top. Not exactly sure. Either way, it's not exactly to size because you can see that this is longer than any of these pieces, which this is technically one of the bottom pieces, I would guess. So now you can put, lift here point, right, or whatever. Make some graphic here that's going to say lift point. If you wanted to draw a little arrow there or something like that. So all kinds of things you can do texture-wise after you've UV mapped. Like the spigot, you can do all the individual parts of this. Once you separate it, map out all the nuts that you wanted to make chrome or aluminum or steel or whatever, and then the black other parts and so on and so forth. So you just, if you unwrap it, smart UV. So it's actually done a fairly decent job of kind of separating everything out, other than the nuts. The nuts you might have to kind of go in here and find. It looks like they're right here, some of them anyway. But yeah, or you can manually go through. I'm going to tell you right now that manually going through the parts for mapping is going to be painstaking, which is why I only do it for the truck itself, the painted part. If you do it for other parts, it's really, really time consuming and mostly unnecessary, really, especially with what we do in game. So the other thing was, how do we make things, what kind of textures should we be looking for? How should we make them look? Well, realistically, it's up to you. I'm not going to claim to be a materials master, as I am not. I'm definitely not that. But I can tell you a little bit about the materials and how they work and what they mean. So I'm going to go over here So this is our ladder. We're going to make it call this material ladder. And we're going to go to the shader presets. I want this to be shiny. It's a new tank, so we're gonna have a diff spec add envy. Add vertex colors to active always needs to be done. What does that mean? What does it mean that you want it to be shiny? Well, add envy means it is adding environmental shininess and sunlight and things reflecting off of it. We don't have a mapping value yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to this way, and I'm going to do that, and then UV project from view. Now I have a UV map, and I'm going to use a shared texture, metal, paint metal. So you see how it's got a little bit of a shine to it? If I change this back to diff spec, it's more dull. Now, the values that they start you with are a little bit high in my eyes for a number of reasons. I'm going to shout out to Jesse for a couple of little notes here. When you're doing metal, chrome, aluminum, etc., the viewport here doesn't do quite a great job of kind of visualizing how that works. I have to excuse the fireworks. It is July 4th, you know. So I like to reduce it down to about a 0.5. And it looks really dark right now, but that could change quite a bit depending on what the final look is in the game. It never quite looks right somehow. The 6B is when the sun is like almost directly overhead, and you can tell by how it reflects off the top of the step there. But yeah, realistically, it's about going through and kind of checking things out about how you want it to look. If I go in here and change it to like a 0.8, it's going to be closer to like a light gray, but it really depends on how you want it to look. Sometimes it's hard to say in this portion, like I said. So, but I will tell you what the other things mean. So, specular means how much shine you're going to get off of the item, how much shine you're going to get from the environment. So if you want it to reduce its shine, you drop it down, say like by half, and you'll notice that reflection of the sunlight from up above is much reduced compared to this. If you look right there at the top of the step. So that's that. Shininess, I didn't figure out until quite long into my career doing this. Shininess is 0 shininess is 100% shininess. That means it is as shiny as it can be. It's almost like they meant it to be amount of dullness. not amount of shininess. So 200 and 250, which most of the SES trucks are, means that it is less shiny than chrome, which is a value of 60 as a default value. Add ambient is not something that I use. This adds other light sources to its shine. So if you have a light that reflects off of this, it will then again reflect that, or it would show the light more clearly on it or something of that nature, but it really degrades the system performance. So it's never added in any SES truck, and I don't add it on any of mine either. There's also a reflection, which you can increase to make it more mirror-like. And Fresnel is yet another value that you can play with a little bit that will increase the chrominess. Fresnel is mirror-like, is what it means. Generally speaking, I don't change very much, especially when I'm working with metal, from the stock values, other than the diffuse and the environmental factor. Environmental factor is either 0.5 or 0.72 for me. .72 is for chrome. 0.5 would be for like a darker metal that's not going to be producing as much shine. So if I want something to be super duper dull, like these base panels, we'll call this a foot something. And then I'm going to make that a diff spec. And then I'm going to add vertex color. I got to add a UV map. And then I'm going to change it to texture. We'll do a generic texture like white. So now it's just going to look like it's white. It doesn't look like it's white right now for some reason. That's interesting. Does it have a paint assigned to it? I feel like it does. Yep. It has blue paint assigned to it, that's why. Very interesting. Okay. Object. Still blue. Anyway. So if I want something to be super dull gray like this, I change the specular value down to like a 0.1, and the shininess goes up to like 200 or like 180, and then it's never going to get any shine from anywhere. It's just going to be super duper dull. All this particular thing does is hold this tank up. That is all it's good for. So this cover, make it red. We're gonna make this a shiny one. Change the color in here like that. Want it down to a 0.6 or so. It's got a UV map. There you go. There's your red. There's your red tank. Or red top. Now that I've separated this, I could make this handle. I'm gonna make this chrome. Chrome is gonna be an add NV no Fresnel. Whoops. Add vertex color. UV map. Vehicle share. Whoops. Textures. Metal. Chrome base. 0.5, specular at 1, environmental factor at 0.72. Look at how sparkly that is. See that? Isn't that wonderful? And then I could make this. These are all individual. That's funny. How many verts are this? Is this? This 7,000 tries per one of these. Oh my goodness gracious, that's a lot. Okay. – 7,000 tries. Okay. Handle. Look at that. So chrome nuts on top with a chrome handle and a red cap. So yeah, these are the things that you can do after you separate stuff. You can make one file with all the colors of the things that you want this thing to be, and then place these items for example, this thing, you can place this wherever you want. This is the white one that we're dealing with, but say this corner of it was red. You put this up there, there's the red part, and then all you would change, you wouldn't change anything about this. This wouldn't be red, this would be white, because the texture itself would be red. And then you could do your chrome down here, cut a little piece out for all the chrome, all your chrome parts go in there. All your gray metal parts could be over here, and so on. So many different things you can do with UV mapping. You can manually map. You can do a smart UV project, and then you can pick things out of the smart UV project. You can do, all sorts of stuff to make it easier on your life, but that's the that's a little tidbit about some materials and some UV mapping. But definitely you want to go ahead and in this top section here, the active tool and workspace settings, you definitely want to go under the space path and fill out all these items and the shader library. That's going to give you your best shot at making sure your materials look proper and that sort of stuff, and you have all the tools that you need there to be able to do that. So I hope this helped you guys with a little bit more of your projects, and I look forward to making another video for you soon. Thanks so much for your support. As always, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.